Thank you for your continued support of this series, Why I Think Curse of Strahd is so good. Before we continue, you should know this contains spoilers. Although we won't be going into every minute detail of every location or gameplay element, it is important to be warned. Secondly, Curse of Strahd, even though written for a game that children play, due to the nature of the setting and the moral ambiguity of what's right and wrong in such a wretched place, viewer discretion is advised.
They always say the scariest part of the dungeon is in the lower level, right? So why do I keep on hearing banging coming from upstairs? Let's continue our way upward after defeating the Heart of Sorrow to the second level, the Court of the Count. Let's make sure that our ambience is on, turn down the lights, because we're about to explore some of Strahd's personal chambers. As a side note, I'll be using my Curse of Strahd tabletop simulator table to give another point of view of the castle. Make sure to let us know in the comments if you like the extra viewpoints. The second floor of Castle Ravenloft, the floor right above the ground level floor, is called the Court of the Count. Think of this as the royal chambers for Strahd and his servants, yet they are not the high living chambers for the Count himself, more of a private area to conduct business. This floor hosts Strahd's audience hall, the King's Hall, which is more of a ceremonial walkway, a royal balcony, an accounting room, and some servants' quarters. Players beware as we continue to search this terrifying dungeon. When you first arrived to Castle Ravenloft, there was a warm light shining from a large high window, and it will occur to the players that this is the room it was coming from. The audience hall is a throne room of sorts. There are some secret passages in here that lead to a lore-building turret access hall, put here to show that this is a real working castle. Oddly enough, not much more of note happens here, save for finding one of the treasures by the throne, if the fortunes foretold this. The next room to have any significant interest, and not just interesting lore building, is the King's Hall. This is really the only room I have any problems with personally with the castle. Think of this as a promenade, a fancy walkway. The box text describes a low moan, which will freak the players out, but it's just the wind. The enemy encounter, if you can call it that, is a vampire, but a vampire on a mannequin on a pulley. It's put here by Strahd to give the players a scare. It's an exact replica of Strahd flying towards them at high speed. There's no combat. It's just a mannequin with 10 hit points. If you're running Adventurers League, go ahead and do this, but if you're running at home, turn this into a regular triggered random encounter, or throw a Revenant at them. No one said that this was going to be easy. The promenade, which by the way is called the King's Hall, and I like to describe it as having pictures of King Barov and Queen Ravnovia in there, and all of Strahd's family as kind of a tribute. Maybe it holds the family heirlooms that aren't completely treasured. But it gives the room a little bit more substance than just a room that has a flying vampire mannequin. But the promenade does lead to a balcony overlook. PCs who are cautious and observant will probably realize the two outward-facing thrones have bodies on them. The bodies are overlooking the chapel and the floor beneath. Players getting too close will trigger an attack by the two Strahd zombies who lay there motionless, and those who try to attack the zombies while they are motionless also triggers an encounter. As an aside, so far this floor seems rather light on encounters. Strahd zombies are only CR1, so a party of 4 to 7 level 9 characters will dispatch them rather easy. As a tip in running the castle dungeon, remember, a random encounter is rolled at every room that doesn't have a scripted encounter. This is only floor 2, and resting in Ravenloft isn't very easy. 2 CR1s may not seem that hard, but it's possible to have been fighting in almost every room so far. And we've only explored 30% of the castle. Now, the encountering room has another odd scripted encounter, but I don't suggest tossing this one out. The PCs will open this room from the King's Court to find a desk and shelves lined with books. The interesting thing here is that there is a man chained to his desk. His name is Leif Lipsiege, a chaotic evil man who just wants to do his work. So, honestly, I think that in Curse of Strahd, sometimes you have to have a little bit of humor to contrast the total darkness, because if there's humor, not only does it break up the monotony of just always being sad, but also if you can see what it's like to be happy, to break it up and then get hit by something more horrific, it kind of makes it hit a little bit harder. And this is definitely one of those encounters that they wrote. See, Leif, he isn't really a slave for Strahd. He works for him, but he was pressed into service. But he's not mad at the players for being there. He just kind of is a grumpy old man who just talks to himself. You see, he's in charge of keeping Strahd's treasures at bay, but he just speaks to himself about how he can't keep track of all of Strahd's treasures if he doesn't know where Strahd hides all of his treasures. So the more astute players who hear the NPC just kind of mumbling to himself in anger will be able to pick up that maybe there's passageways or secret compartments that we haven't looked for yet. Maybe they haven't figured that out yet. And this is actually a really good encounter to help with that, because this means that players now know that there is more than meets the eye to Strahd's castle, and they'll have to really keep an eye out for anything hidden. Now, here's the interesting thing. Leif won't help the players in much of a way other than helping the PCs find the holy symbol of Ravenkind, if that symbol is in the castle and it hasn't been found yet. He'll draw a crude map, but he doesn't know if the danger lies where he draws it to. He just draws you kind of the closest and quickest way to get there. He refuses to leave, and if the PCs don't really do anything other than thank him for his help, he'll say that there are some treasure in this room, but he forgets where he hid all the keys for them. So any player that takes 10 minutes and rolls an investigation check, and then in that 10 minutes, you can, as a DM, trigger a random encounter if you would like. It helps the PCs find some keys out in these hollowed out books that line the shelves, because this is an accounting room. They open 4 chests with a little bit of money. It's mostly copper pieces. The last treasure chest that they find, it's not really a treasure chest, it's just a locked book, basically, has a manual of bodily health in it, which increases your constitution score by 2 if you study it for 48 hours. It's not the most helpful right now, but it could become helpful, maybe if you tend to use these characters later on. If Leif is threatened, he will ring a bell, and a random, separate list of random encounter enemies will come and attack the PCs. Leif does not leave the room. He comically just wants to stay there and get his work done. Now, there is an extensive trap on this floor, one that warrants its own diagram and a half-page explanation. The gist of it is that you go to the secret door and step in, and you'll set off the trap that drops you to the first sub-basement. The secret door is located in the King's Hall, and it leads to the top of the trap. Now, if you find the mechanical room first, which is in a different floor, you can control this trap like an elevator. However, if you don't have the mechanical gist of it worked out, it will just drop you down to the first sub-basement. However, if you can get it worked out, it's actually quite beneficial because it'll take the players up and down with avoiding backtracking. And remember, backtracking in every room does spawn a random encounter. So it's a great way to move up and down the floors without as much encounters. Now the next room we'll explore is the upper floor servants' quarters. This has an interesting non-combat encounter. There is a wardrobe that is coffin-shaped in here, which will spook the players, probably. Now if the PCs open it, a dress pops out and dances forever until one of the PCs stops it. Maybe it belonged to a servant who danced to keep her sanity in such a desolate place. Put a spin on that like that, and it'll make it even seem creepier. It's kind of silly, but think about it. Someone had to dance just to keep themselves from crying all the time. And finally, before we go up to the next floor, there is one last room. Upstairs we can hear some more banging and a little bit more motion, but we can hear humming coming directly from the room that's right below the landing to the upstairs. The PCs open the door, and there's a woman dusting the furniture in what seems to be a waiting room, or a possible room for guests to stay temporarily if they have to. Her name is Helga Ruvak, and claims to be here as more of a hostage of Strahd. She said that she was captured by Strahd while she lived in Barovia, and her dad, the bootmaker, is probably missing her dearly. An insight check determines that she's technically not lying, at least about the bootmaker part. She actually does come from Barovia, and she is the bootmaker's daughter. She begs the PCs to help her, and if they do, she'll attack them at her best time. She is in fact a loyal vampire spawn of Strahd and uses the stats of such, and she will attack when the PCs have their guard down the most. It's an interesting encounter to have because I think that she might be on their side, and she does put on a pretty good show. The players probably did meet her dad in Barovia, so when she attacks, it catches them off guard. Now when the players do kill her, they can loot her 750 gold piece necklace that she carries, but it's not magical. So now you're at the base of the stairs leading up to Strahd's private chambers. There's a thumping noise amid other disturbing noises coming from up the long, dark stairwell. Stay tuned next time when we explore a sad, savage man's personal quarters.